Good evening and welcome to the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan's 2020 Future of Work series, presented in collaboration with Kent District Library. I'm Michael Vendetta and I'm the Executive Director of the Council. And on behalf of my colleagues Erica Kubik and Emily Smith and the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan, I welcome all of you. Thank you for adjusting with us as we program responsibly in these days of COVID-19. We hope that you are staying safe and that you'll show grace to those in your community. Council's mission is to empower the people and organizations of West Michigan to engage thoughtfully with the world. We do this with the help of 50 local companies, 11 educational partners, and many community members. Together, we seek to provide programming that is credible, that is objective, that is relevant, that is civil, and that is compelling. To change the world, we think you first need to know the world. You can learn more about what we do at worldmichigan.org. Tonight, we say a special thank you to our friends at Kent District Library, who annually partner with us to provide this free informational resource to West Michigan community. And it's my pleasure to welcome Lance Werner, the Director of KDL, to share with you what the library has happening now. Lance?
Thank you so much, Michael. We are so proud to partner with the World Affairs Council, and tonight's topic is quite timely. We're very, very excited to hear from Dr. Pink. He actually happens to be a personal friend of mine, and I have a huge amount of respect for him and the work that he does up there at Grand Rapids Community College. This is very timely in that so many businesses and people have been impacted by this crisis, and we're all trying to figure out how, what's next and what can we do to get back to where we were before this all began. KDL has over 350 employees working remotely, serving over 180,000 patrons. Prior to the COVID-19 crisis, we began to build workforce development services for businesses and individuals. And we have a number of things that we offer that are available electronically, like lynda.com for software training. We have language skills training available through Mango Languages. We have the Career Online High School to help adults that want to finish their high school journey to get that done online. And all of these things are free and online, and we encourage you to check them out at www.kdl.org. Thank you again for joining us for the conversation tonight, and I'll turn it back over to Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lance. And we are pleased to have Dr. Bill Pink with us and are grateful to him for his flexibility to engage us in this format. Dr. Pink became the 10th president of Grand Rapids Community College in May of 2017. Prior to his appointment, he was vice president and dean for workforce development at GRCC. He's been an educator for over 25 years, and before community college, Dr. Pink served as vice president for academic affairs at Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City. While Abilene, Texas is his hometown, Dr. Pink lived in Oklahoma City for 18 years before making Grand Rapids his home. And he has taught and or coached in Oklahoma, Nebraska, Oregon, and Michigan. He has an associate's degree from York College, Nebraska, a bachelor's degree from Oklahoma Christian University, a master's degree from the University of Central Oklahoma, and a doctorate from the University of Oklahoma. He's a sought-after public speaker with topics related to diversity, leadership, economic and workforce development, and faith-based presentations. As an educator, Dr. Pink teaches public speaking courses, as well as athletic administration at the undergraduate and graduate levels. In September 2019, Dr. Pink was named the 2019 Pace Setter Today by the National Council for Marketing and Public Relations District 3. The award goes to the college president or CEO that has demonstrated special leadership and support in college communications and marketing. After Dr. Pink's presentation this evening, there will be ample time for questions. You may type them into the YouTube comments section, or you can text them to 616-308-6560. Please exhibit civility to our guests and hospitality to others by asking respectful and succinct questions. Dr. Pink's presentation tonight is titled Working Together for Growth in West Michigan, Industry and Education. Join me in welcoming Dr. Bill Pink.
Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's good to see you and good to see the staff from the World Affairs Council here in West Michigan. What a great organization, and one that GRCC has been a part of for a good while now. Also, thanks to Lance. It's good to see him. I'll tell you, friends, it's good to see anybody in these days, whether it be on screen or in person. More on screen is how you and I are probably working our lives these days. But Lance, it's good to see you, and it's good for our relationship we have with the Kent Library System, and it's good to work with you as a leader in that regard. It's a interesting topic from the standpoint of what we do at the community college at GRCC specifically. I give you greetings from our institution. GRCC is the oldest community college in the state of Michigan and one of the oldest in the country. Some 104 years old, celebrating about getting ready to go 105 here real soon. Our institution has been part of this community for a long time, and I'm honored and humbled to be the leader of that institution. You have a great jewel downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan, in Grand Rapids Community College. I want to give a special, pause and a special word right now. As many of you in our community know, here in the last day or so, we lost Deb Bailey. In this community, Deb has been an incredible, incredible leader. For our college, she's been an incredible leader in terms of being a member of our board of trustees. And we are, as many in our community, saddened by her passing. But personally, and the relationship I had with Deb as being one of my trustees, but also as a friend, our community and our college will miss Deb and the influence she had in this community. So I want to make sure I mention that as we get into our conversation tonight. This theme, future of work, and talking tonight about the partnership, and you'll hear that word partnership come up a lot, because my topic in talking about industry and education and this idea of future of work, and my background that Michael mentioned, coming from this, our School of Workforce Development at GRCC, as serving as vice president and dean of that school, all the things that we were able to do in that role, but also with some of the roles that I am blessed to be a part of now, in being a board member for West Michigan Works, being a board member for other of our local organizations, aside from United Way, and also with Spectrum Health and Hospital Board. Those type of boards enable give me the blessing to be able to see a bit wider lens in terms of what the future work and the present day work looks like. And so what I'll share with you tonight are insights based on that, but you'll hear a lot about the work of the community college in a sense of what we do at GRCC. You'll see a little bit of that, but you'll also just hear from me in terms of just some of my own speculation and musings, if you will, because of not only where we have been, but where we are right now in terms of dealing with the coronavirus and what a West Michigan looks like, will look like in a post-COVID-19 world. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight as well. And so after that, and sharing some of those thoughts with you, be happy to take some questions. So let me share my screen real quick, and we will dive into our content this evening. My computer decided not to show it all, so here we go. So as I mentioned, that's our title tonight, Working Together for Growth in West Michigan, as far as industry and education is concerned. I want to start out by talking about just kind of setting some framework here. And I think it's so appropriate to be a part of this future of work conversation, and so appropriate that KDL is one of the sponsors of this, because a very interesting topic is what I see in the book, Our Towns. And let me tell you about the book, Our Towns. Our Towns, written by James Fallows, he and his wife, Deborah Fallows. The story about the Fallows is that several years ago, they decided, if you hadn't read the book or are unfamiliar with the book, they decided to take a trip, and they got into a small aircraft, two-person aircraft, and they flew over 100,000 miles all over the country. And what they were doing is that they were targeting small towns, smaller towns, smaller communities across our country. And what they wanted to do is look at all those communities. And we're talking, it may not have, some of those weren't just very small rural areas, although some of them had a bit of rural, but a little bit larger than what you would find as far as some of the large cities are concerned, a little smaller than that. So what they did is that they went to those communities and they asked the question, what is it that causes and that keeps these communities thriving? What is it about these communities that really keeps those communities going and sustaining of community and of progress? It was interesting that they came up in almost every situation over 100,000 miles, that they came up with basically two main things that they found in just about every community they went to. Two main things. The first thing, those communities had a thriving local library system. They found that many of those communities, there was a library there in the community and system in the city that really was a rallying point, really was a point of helping the community in terms of not only community, but also just in helping in information and rallying place. A library. And the other thing they found in those communities was a vibrant local community college. Interesting, those two things, because what they found is that not only the community college partnering with the library in some cases, but really some of the things that the community college brought to the community in terms of education, in terms of another rallying and gathering place, a convener, if you will. Interesting with what he and his wife found out. And as I've heard him speak a number of times over the last year and a half, it really is an interesting dynamic to hear them talk about just how thriving those communities were and how consistent those two things were. I think it's very appropriate starting out that way because of what we have here in our community. Among other organizations, you have that thriving library system of what we are seeing tonight and talking about tonight with Lance and all the good work that they do, but also in having the community college and the work that I know has happened in this community for decades from GRCC. Now, anyone who hears me speak, you always know that I start out talking about these two words. I believe that as a community college, the overall challenge, aside from our strategic plan, aside from everything, and this does hit in terms of what we talk about industry and education, there's two things that I always talk about. Are you relevant? Are you responsive? As a community college, and for the most part, there are a lot of organizations that can ask themselves that question. Are you relative and are you relevant and are you responsive? So relevant. Are you relevant to, as far as GRCC is concerned, are we relevant to ourselves, to our students, to our community? I say to ourselves because we try to stay relevant to each other as a GRCC family. But are we relevant to our community? Are we providing the things that the community needs from their community college? And most important to me, are we relevant to our students? Do we have that relevant education, that relevant preparation that's going to prepare them in the right way for the next job or for the next institution or for both? I always talk about being relevant as far as giving example of those organizations who may not have kept an eye on staying relevant. I always ask the question, when was the last time you saw a Blockbuster video store? That one's been a while. What happened to Blockbuster? Didn't stay relevant, didn't keep up with what was relevant in terms of what people were looking for in terms of their home entertainment and movies. So what happened to Blockbuster? Netflix, streaming video. If you can't keep your eye on what's relevant, you will find yourself getting left behind. But that also means we have to stay responsive, that if we're going to stay relevant, we must be responsive to the needs of our community, to the needs of each other, and to the needs of our students. That is what leads into this conversation in talking about how the community college, in this case, or how education for the most part, what does that picture look like with partnership and working with our industry partners, working with our community? So as I said, partnerships matter. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean by partnerships matter in some things that just a small sampling of some things that we are doing as far as our community is concerned. Again, partnerships. Partnerships matter. That mix of education and industry. Friends, I will tell you that without that type of a dynamic and that type of focus, especially in a post-COVID-19 world, that type of focus is going to have to be paramount and prominent of what we do going forward, present and going forward. So I give an example of one of those partnerships, the Public Works Academy. Again, you'll hear elements of what I'm talking about in terms of what relevance means around partnerships and what I believe is the direction we're going to need to think about going forward, this future of work. So, Public Works Academy. That was an effort to bring together many of the entities you see on the screen right now, City of Grand Rapids, City of Kentwood, some of these municipalities to come together and say, what are those public works functions that you need more people or more training or both? And so what those entities, those municipalities partnering with the community college came up with were these different areas of program, whether it be street, whether it be wastewater, all these areas that they said, here's some things that we need more in terms of workforce, more in terms of what we shaped as an academy. And that academy has all various pieces wrapped around it in terms of what those focus areas are. People come into that academy, and in some cases, it may be existing workers in those municipalities at the city level who come back. They get the training and education through the Public Works Academy. Now they're prepared for what we call upskilling. They're prepared for that next job. And so what happens is that it's not what I call the archaic arrogance of higher education, where many of us used to think we could come into the room and say, okay, here's what you need. Here's what we're going to do this for you. No, that needs to be the conversation of let's sit down and let's talk about what you need, so that as we and as education builds these programs, you build it together with that educate or that industry partner. So when you have all these entities coming to the table saying, GRCC, here's what we need in this academy, now we know that that education is going to be relevant. Because if we're not responsive to what they're saying they need, then we will prepare someone who they won't be able to use in their jobs that we're talking about. And so I think about this because there was one young man, a quick story. There was one young man who was in the academy and had graduated from our Public Works Academy. I met him, talked to him about one of the cities that he was working for. I'll just use that term. I won't say which specific entity. He said, I'm working for this particular city. I said, that's awesome. And we were very proud of him. And he was working for them because of being through the academy. A few months later, I had a presentation I was making down in Texas, I believe. And I was going to talk about, part of that presentation was going to be about the Public Works Academy. So I wanted to talk about him, but it dawned on me, Bill, you need to make sure that he is still with that particular city. Well, in calling some of our folks at the college, I said, hey, is John still there at that city? They said, no, he's no longer there. And I was going, oh, wait a minute. I said, he's at this other city now because they pulled him away because they're paying him more money. So for me, I thought, okay, it feels like a loss, but that's a win, because what that means is that that academy is working for him, that he's able to scale up in terms of those who are willing to pay him more, to take care of his family better. But that is a partnership that is huge in terms of those municipalities that you see there. A second one is what we do in certified nursing, CNA. Again, it was one of those where the industry, the sector came to us and said, can we build this together? So we said, well, let's figure out together, aside from those things that we know the CNA, as far as those competencies are concerned, what else do you need from this, from what that graduate would look like? So those partners that you see listed, many of them were at the table and said, here's what that needs to look like. Again, partnerships matter. So then we figured out, well, wait a minute, for the kind of lab we want to have for this, we don't have space on campus for that. Then the top one that you see there, Holland Home, came in and said, You can have it at our facility. We will retrofit one of our spaces just for this training lab. And right now in Holland Home, in one of their sites right here in Grand Rapids, is GRCC, is our CNA lab. Now for Holland Home, awesome partner and great decision to say, you know what, if GRCC is going to be preparing them right there in our space, what a great opportunity for us to be able to continue to have that connection with the college in terms of CNAs and workforce. Because one thing we know is on the healthcare side of things, a CNA is one of those professions that are harder to get, and the more we talk to our partners, the more they need. But again, it's the partnership. It's the partnership of having a space that we do that work in, and it's also the partnership in terms of those who came to the table and said, here's what that needs to look like as far as that CNA training is concerned. And then the final thing I'll talk about in those partnerships, our America's Promise initiative, which America's Promise initiative was a national grant competition of which GRCC was one of the only grantees in the country to get the full $6 million grant over the course of 5 years. You see all those partners there, friends. That's what it's about. You see healthcare partners there, you see community-based partners there, because the focus of America's Promise is getting more people into healthcare jobs. And so right now, we're about three and a half years into the America's Promise initiative, and the Michigan effort around America's Promise compared on a national scale is one of those that is truly, in my opinion, leading the country in terms of what that work looks like. But it's hard to get there when you do not have the kind of partners that we have here in West Michigan and what you see listed there. That America's Promise initiative continues to prepare people and getting them to work. Because friends, partnerships matter. That's what's going to be huge as we go forward in especially what we call that West Michigan post-COVID-19 world. Now, as I started thinking about this presentation a couple of months ago, before we were on a stay-at-home and being in the state that we are now in terms of shutdown and quarantine, I had, a lot of what you just heard of. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. Those partnerships, that kind of dynamic. They're also, because of where we are today, caused me also to say, well, but there's more to this story than just the idea of how partnerships matter. Partnerships matter, but also let's talk about what those partnerships should look like in a post-COVID-19 West Michigan. So I'll just say two things about it, and there are other things we could cover. Let's just cover two. The first thing right now, again, around these partnerships and around getting out of this place that we are with COVID-19, we must, and it sounds like obvious, but we got to expand it a little bit, getting people back to work. We know that as far as some of the estimates go, as high as 29% unemployment in Michigan. We know in West Michigan, it's a high number as well. The idea of getting people back to work from a partnership perspective, that conversation has to start yesterday and day before. We've got to be in that conversation already. And I will tell you that those are some conversations that are already happening with our institution and many of our industry partners, many of our sectors of employment around West Michigan, Grand Rapids, and surrounding. But also some of those conversations with our community-based organizations already have begun, as well as some of our larger organizations, such as our partners at West Michigan Works and other places. Because friends, this is one that we know many people being out of work, we have to start that conversation and has started that conversation already. How do we get people back to work? What does that partnership look like? Well, as we are seeing more and more, and what I had hoped for and was very hopeful for, we're now starting to see a bit more of, which are some of the federal dollars coming from some of the stimulus packages that have and will come. Some of those funds hopefully being directed toward helping in terms of getting people back to work. So what does that look like? Well, we know that some industry partners do not have all the funds they used to in terms of helping get folks trained and educated for their jobs. Some of those funds help go toward that. But we also know that if people are out of work, they probably don't have a whole lot of money to spend in coming back to school. And so us doing our part in terms of what we can do to help, but also how we partner with our industry partners and in looking to some of those funds to help get people back in places so they can get to work. And then using some of our local resources in some of our local community-based organizations to make sure that we are doing all we can as the community's college in helping get that, starting to fill those gaps. Because as we get people back to work, that means we're going to get our companies back to work and get our companies back to a place where they are starting to thrive again. And right now, so many of those companies are barely even surviving, if they've survived at all. This will be imperative that we all get back to helping our companies and helping our people. Without people getting back to work, it's hard to get companies back up and running. And so coming out of COVID-19, the question becomes, and you've heard it just like I have, all the technology that we're using right now and that we've adjusted to, whether it be in and out of education, technology is prevailing, or you see a question mark there. How will it prevail? How will we as a community, as sectors of business, sectors of industry, how will we continue to leverage the technology that we have learned so much more about, and how some of our information technology companies will come to that table to say, here's how you can do your business. In many cases, I've talked to many friends, our institution included, that we know there are some things based on how we are now using technology. There are some things that we'll actually find ourselves continuing to do post COVID-19. And then regional implications. When people ask you about the future of work coming out of COVID-19 especially, it's a hard question. It was a hard question pre-COVID-19. It's a hard question to answer post-COVID-19, really, because it's such a regional question. It's not as much we like to ask it nationally. We all look different. We look different on the west side of the state than they do on the east side of the state. Certainly than they do in the north or in the UP. So what those industries will need are truly going to be conversations, partnership again, conversations that have to happen locally and regionally to make sure coming out of COVID-19, we can hit those regional needs of our companies, as we call the new abnormal workplace, of what we see now in terms of what work looks like in our own sectors and companies. It's what we are calling, and in many cases, what are those differences going to be? Part of that conversation we're having with some of those companies, and it's a big question I like to ask some of those leaders and presidents and CEOs of those companies, the positions that you lost during COVID-19, as you start to hire back, are they going to be the same positions, or are they going to look different? My guess is in some cases those positions are going to look a little different based on what we know now and how we'll have to work. And then the last thing I say is that you have to eat fish. When I was growing up, and my dad and mom used to cook, fix catfish, fried catfish on Saturdays. One of the things that we would do, because my dad would fry catfish whole and leave all the bones in. And when you eat fish in that way, you eat the meat and you throw away the bones. That's the kind of thinking we've got to be in this regard, coming out of COVID-19, keeping those things within our companies and within our organizations that are useful to us in terms of technology, in terms of processes, all those things that COVID-19 has swayed us on. What are those things that we can keep and use, and what are the bones? What pieces of it that we throw away because it doesn't make sense in terms of what our work is? So from a standpoint of what we do in higher education, I will say from the education side of things, these are some of the things that you see, and this is from a GRCC perspective, some promising practices we were looking at before, and promising practices we're definitely focused on now because of how we try to answer the question of how we can be responsive to our community. So that idea, accelerated course options, more online program and development, which we are seeing more of. We started this year around weekend classes, weekend college is what I call it. Prior learning assessment takes what a person knows coming in the door and says, what do you know as far, because you've been working in this industry for so long, what are some of those things you know that we can apply to your education? And then the last thing there, it's one of my sermons of getting past the either or proposition. It's a both and. I get so tired of the either or proposition of you either are going to be over here on this workforce side of things and skilled trades, or you're going to be over here on the other side working toward a degree. Friends, that can be a both and. Let's not let people get us so shrunk into the mindset of an either or when it comes to that. We have many of our students that may come to us for skilled trades, come to our Tassel MTech, get some of those certificates, get that certificate training, come back to the institution and realize, because I finished that certificate, I can do college work. It gives them that confidence in themselves to come back to us. Now, some of that will apply to a college, toward your college associate degree, finish an associate degree, go on and finish a bachelor's degree with some of our four-year partners. That's what we're talking about. It can't be just into this idea of the either or proposition. Get into the both and. That's a sermon, sorry, get going. Final thing I want to share with you, and then I want to take questions. If you are like I am, you have been spending a lot of time seeing different things on television. And last week I got up in the morning, was getting a little workout, had the television on, and saw from 1992, saw the championship gold medal Olympic basketball game from the 92 Olympics in Barcelona with United States versus, it didn't matter. I believe it was Croatia at that time, but that year it didn't matter because that year was the year of the dream team. It was so interesting to relive those days in watching Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Larry Bird, Patrick Ewing, Clyde, all these guys. I remembered it so well. I took my mind back to 1992, and at that time I was actually coaching college basketball. And I remember those feelings of what was going on then, because you have to remember what was happening as far as the Olympics was concerned. The previous Olympics back in '88, the United States were beaten. The basketball, the gold medal, the basketball team was beaten by Russia, by the Soviet Union. And what was so interesting is that it was a wake-up call. Oh, wait a minute, we got beaten basketball? Are you kidding me? So for the '92 Olympics, what happened is that the United States decided to use some of our professional players because everyone else in the world was using professional players. We were the only ones that were still using college players in amateur, one of the only ones, if not the only one. And I remember so well that as that team took the floor over the course of the Olympics, that team, which has been called by some to be possibly the greatest professional team of any sport to ever play, what I remembered in watching it last week, friends, is how a country could unite around a basketball team. Because all of a sudden it's the Olympics, and all of a sudden, when it comes to the pride of our country, everything else dropped. All the differences and things that you have, those went away all of a sudden because now you support this team because they represented our country. There was a unity that came around the Olympics and around these gentlemen that said, that's our country. They represent us. Didn't matter who us was in terms of what your political affiliation was, color of your skin. None of that mattered when it came to those men representing the United States of America. And as I watched that, I thought that's the type of thinking we have to be today, friends. We've got to be able in this post-COVID-19 world, when it comes to our present and future of work, we've got to be able to drop all those things, unite around the fact that we are the United States of America. We're West Michigan. We are a community that cannot let the division that a virus or anything else can cause, we can't let that cause us to be as divided as I sometimes see today. My encouragement to you is, as you think through this idea of the future of work, what does that mean? When I talk about partnerships matter, that is so imperative, but even more importantly, those partnerships only happen because of people getting together and working out what the differences are, working out what the wrinkles are. But that's the way this pride comes back, is that it only comes back if we are a united region, united state, and a united country. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take some questions at this time.
That's great, Bill. Thank you very much. What an interesting conversation. Thank you for presenting it. And thanks for ending on a basketball image. And man, and it's catfish analogy. Wow. That was a first for me, but it works. It really, I appreciate that. That's really good. Hey, we do have questions, and you can join in asking the questions of Dr. Pink. Type them into the YouTube comments section, or you can text them to 616-308-6560. And Bill, a leadoff question that we have concerns the specific kind of jobs that might be coming out of post-COVID-19. But even before that, you know that our first few lecturers in this series talked about automation, talked about artificial intelligence, talked about technology. You touched on that a little bit. Is the active conversation going on now about new jobs, new majors we've never heard of yet that are sort of in an incubation stage but are on the forefront? What's the conversation like about new jobs in a new world?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing happen is, and it's the reason why I brought up, Michael, the point about regional implications. So one thing that we have noticed, and one thing that we try to do a lot as far as the college is concerned, is to make sure we are allowing our industry partners to help lead those discussions with our assistance as needed to decide at what point we need to move further in front, but we try to stay side by side. Because what happens is that in some cases, some of those jobs that may be on, as I talk about, the other side of the Lake Michigan, might not be the same and look the same as they are on this side of the lake. For example, so if some of those technology pieces, artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, we see some of those in some of our areas here in West Michigan. I see a bit of that out on the lakeshore when we work with our lakeshore partners quite a bit in terms of automation mostly. But as far as what some of my colleagues over on the west side of the country, over in the California, Arizona, some of my community college partners over there, some of what they're dealing with is a bit faster over there. And you know how it is true that some of those things see their way from coast to coast. I think that more of those jobs are coming than we see right now that are already in other parts of the country that I think we will see. I think some of those, what I would describe as newer jobs, incubators you describe, I think I describe as hybrids. So jobs that used to be one thing that marry something else. For example, one thing that we talk about is the advantage. What's the advantage of taking, say on our campus, we have a computer information systems department, which has all those IT related programs. But we also also have an automotive program where we teach automotive technician and those certifications. Well, when you have more vehicles that are coming through as far as automation is concerned, automated vehicles, driverless vehicles. Our question becomes, so is there something of a technician that needs to have both of those pieces from a CIS standpoint and from an automotive standpoint? What does that look like? We've had some of that conversation, then stand back and make sure that the big three on the other side of the state and those OEMs that sit over here on this side of the state, that we're having enough conversations with them to know what does that look like. And so while I think that may be somewhere down the road, I do think it's on the road. And I think there are some of those type of jobs that I say are more of what, from a West Michigan perspective, I think we'll have a whole lot more look from a, what again, as I call it, a hybrid, where we are looking at some jobs that are existing over here and over here that need to have some cross training and some cross breeding in that regard. That's what I'm looking for right now. That's what I suspect to see more of.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. You talked about partnerships a lot, and there's a question about collaboration between the colleges and universities in West Michigan. Actually, I think industry sometimes does a better job at partnering and collaborating, and sometimes our colleges are in such competition for students that you want to be the one that's known for this field or that field. But what do you see in terms of that? Community college has always, I think, been a leader in collaborating with other schools as admissions, as enrollment is an issue, and as new work needs a collaboration of faculty of different campuses and whatever. How do you see that future?
For us, as a community college, and we are blessed here in Grand Rapids because we have incredible partnerships with our four-year institutions. So, for example, from 1 year to the next, usually Ferris State and Grand Valley are going at it as to who has the most GRCC graduates transferring, right? And so usually that's something we check. Hey, who got the most, right? From a Ferris State perspective, and you talk about the partnership, and my mantra is that without partnerships, I don't think we can do our work as well. So when you go to the Applied Technology Center on our campus downtown in Grand Rapids, when you go into the Applied Technology Center right there on Ransom, when you go into the first main floor of that building, you find Ferris State University, Grand Rapids. They're right there in our building. An individual can get an associate degree in some of our skill trades areas, plastics, engineering, technology, other degrees like that. They can do an associate degree at our place, most classes in the Applied Technology Center, transfer to Ferris State, finish a bachelor's degree at Ferris State, and never have to leave that building, never have to leave our campus. And in what we have with Ferris State and with several other institutions, which I'm a big proponent of this, you talk with in terms of education, higher ed partnerships, we work with Ferris State and a few other institutions on 2+2 degrees, but also 3+1. So 3+1, 3 years at the community college, 1 year at the university, and finish with an associate and a bachelor's degree. So instead of 2 at our place, 2 at their place, equivalent, we go 3 at our place, 1 at their place. Talk about the money that is saved from those individuals. That's huge. I would be remiss to not come back to the fact of Grand Valley being one of our strong partners as well. Grand Valley and our agreements with them go very deep in terms of those partnerships. When you go out to the Lakeshore, GRCC we have 4 different locations we're in on the Lakeshore in Holland area, Holland, Zeeland. None of those 4 belong to us. One of those is the GVSU Meyer campus. And so we're partnered with them in that space. By the way, if construction can get going again by fall of 2021, we will have our own facility out on the Lake Shore, which we're excited about. But those partnerships, Davenport University, as well as our private institutions here, are all partners because it is imperative to us that our students have as many opportunities as possible when it comes to transfer, many choices. And that's important to me that our partnership with our 4-year institutions is robust.
Thanks, Bill. Another question about the difference between maybe degrees and credentialing, and we hear badging now, and as people need to shift and get different competencies, what's the conversation around, not just getting an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, but what about, getting a credential in this or some badging in this, to give yourself more of the flexibility as jobs change?
Well, and it's a good question because when you think about the future of work, I think about that alongside the future of education, higher education in this regard. I think the idea of credentials and what we call stackable credentials. And so giving a person that I call it a highway, we use the word pathway. I like to call it a highway because a highway has on and off ramps. So for many individuals, they're on that education highway and they may finish a credential or 2, and then they have to get off the highway because they need to work a little bit to make more money so they can get back on the highway. Or they have a family, which many of our students do. They're supporting a family, and so they have 2 or 3 jobs in many cases. So those credentials, as those credentials can stack up, whether it be badges or certificates, what's important to me and important to our institution is that those credentials have stackability to them that stack toward that associate degree. From what we see in our institution, even if you go over to the MTech and take some of those skill trades certificates that when you take them, they have no college credit attached to them. But I will tell you, Michael, when a person finishes that certificate, they come right back to us and we equate those to college classes. And we say, you know, you finish the certificate, you have a certificate in welding. Here are the classes that equates to on the credit side. Let's work on getting that associate degree. And what's nice is that those credentials have to be able, in my opinion, they got to be able to stack so that you get those increments of success, because that's what encourages our students to continue.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's helpful. A question from a YouTube listener, watcher. Wondered if you could be more specific about the process of developing the partnerships that you referenced. How did GRCC become aware of the needs, and what were some key steps as you built them with your industry partners?
It happens. I can give you probably about 3 different ways it happens. Number one, we deal with probably around 300 companies in West Michigan in different ways. Sometimes it's because they send people to us. Sometimes it's apprenticeships. Sometimes it's customized training that we may do for them, for that particular company. Some of those companies, when they have specific needs, they will come to us and they will say, can you do X, Y, and Z? Well, what we like to do is figure out, is it just for you or is it for your industry? Because if it's an industry question, then we can really do some cool things of building certificates or into programs. We work on those. But if it's just that company, then it's okay. Well, let's figure it out. Let's work on that for you and do some customized training. The other way it happens, though, is our people on campus will see a need because of how much they work with companies. And they will, I'll tell you what we did about 1.5 years ago with some of our assisted living and healthcare partners. We brought them in to have breakfast, and I was at this breakfast, and my workforce team was there. We're all sitting there with our notepads and pencils. Sit down, eat a good meal. Now let's talk about what is it that you're seeing? What is it that you need? And so as they share things out, as they say, here's what this looks like for us, it gives us then opportunity to say, okay, what do we need to build then? How do we need to build that? And those companies being there at the table, that's always a helpful piece for us, because now, again, they're telling us what they need. And then we say, how do you want to come alongside this? A big key to that, though, Michael, as we build any of those partnerships and any of those programs, a big key to it is not only their input, but the probably the most important part to me, honestly, is the question of, so if we do this for you, will you hire these students? Because what we never want to do is build that, prepare these students, they go through it, and then there's not a job on the other end. It is so imperative that those companies are there accepting those students in. The final way we do it is what you saw with the America's Promise grant. Opportunity comes around where the federal government or a local partner is saying, yeah, we want to help you out. We want to build a workforce, and we want to build it in construction, manufacturing, whatever. We then pull those partners together and say, okay, here's the opportunity. What is it that you need, that we need to do in terms of, is it machining? Is it welding? Is it CNC? What is it that you need more of? And when we have a funder come to the table, you also saw on the list some community-based organizations. If you look down that list, you saw these healthcare, but then you saw the Urban League, Hispanic Center, the Women's Resource Center. Those are huge partners as well, because those are the companies that are right, those are the organizations right there in our neighborhoods. In many cases, our neighborhoods of focus here in Grand Rapids, who are connected to the people who are the ones who are looking for what that next step of life is in terms of work. And so those are some of the companies we partner with, and that's a trusted entity in those neighborhoods. We become that trusted partner because their trusted partner is with us. And so those are the ways that those opportunities come about, and they can come by us going to make the visit and asking the question, because we like to do that. but sometimes it's the companies and organizations and sectors coming to the college saying, here's what we need. How do we work together to do this?
Yeah, thanks for that. What are some best practices as we move forward to the new future of work post COVID-19 to create more equitable opportunities and solutions for education and workforce to be sure that underrepresented, vulnerable populations might benefit?
The word intentionality has to be there. So if we're going to claim that we're going to try to reach those populations, those that are experience disparities, we have to make sure we go to those populations and those people to say, okay, let's figure out how we can do this in terms of how can we make it accessible to you. That's part of the partnership that we talk about with the community-based organizations. And I'll give you an example. One thing that our folks at our MTech built, and this was with, again, some partnerships. We built what we call a contextualized offering. So we took welding and we took what we do in ESL, in English language, in English as a second language, mixed those two together to where we provided welding training alongside ESL. So then we talked to our Hispanic Center, West Michigan, and talked to them about some of our Latinx populations that were looking for jobs or looking to upskill in what they were doing. And so when those individuals came for an orientation to the MTech, that conversation, this is a big piece to the puzzle. You talk about intentionality. That conversation was not just, here's what this program is going to do, but it was also, so when's the best day and time that we should offer this? And so they told us, well, if you offered it on this day at this time, that would be more accessible. Deal. So that's when we did it. And that making sure that accessibility, because you can talk about building the program as long as you want to, but if it's not accessible, you hadn't done any good. And so making sure from a time perspective of those in that cohort, what's the best day and time this can be offered, because it's going to match your work schedule, it's going to match your childcare schedule, it's going to match all those things. That one was highly successful. And then we started doing the same thing with ESL and machining. We started then trying to blow it out even more. And so it has to be intentional. And if it's not intentional, you can say it as long as you want to, but it will never make any strides in some of those areas that we know disparities exist. And we've got to be, and that to me is one of those best practices of going to and bringing that community to the place and to us to say, what do you need?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's helpful. This is tricky ground to traverse, and the educational institutions industry is doing this now for the student, both the young student and the older learner that's coming back. What's the infrastructure to guide them with this? If as things change so rapidly, it can get confusing for the student to, am I really taking the right courses? Am I really going down the right path? And again, finding out, you said it earlier, you don't want someone to go down this path and find out that job isn't there for them anymore. So what is the thinking and the infrastructure there to be those guides along students as they're trying to figure out this changing landscape of work?
Yeah, and it's such a two-way street, Michael, because we have a huge responsibility in that answer, we the institution. So making sure that we have all those support systems in place, from advisement, counseling, we have counseling on campus, to tutoring services, to all of our student life supports that we give. For example, our food pantry hasn't closed during COVID-19. We once a week are still distributing food for our students. They drive by campus and we're giving boxes of food. Yesterday we had a giveaway. We gave away diapers and wipes as well. That work continues. And so to make sure students are aware of what those supports are is a huge job of ours. But I will also say that another side of that is truly the responsibility of the student to say, and I don't care what age they are, that student to make sure that they are tapping into those resources, and that they are not only when they see those things and hear it from us, because we are always feeding information, social media and other ways. Here's what's out there. Here's what we're doing. that they are tapping into those and that they are looking into. Our tutoring service does not help if you don't go to it. It won't help you a bit if you're not giving visit to those areas. And so it's imperative that that be a two-way street. And the thing about it is that we have on our camp, our average age is about 23 years old, 24 years old. And that tells us that we have our 18-year-olds and we have our 35-year-olds. And so what that means is that that diversity of student, that diversity of person, it's important to us that we hit the whole spectrum in terms of what their needs are. And those services are very much focused. The other thing we did during COVID, that we've been doing during COVID-19, we've been making laptop computers available to loan out to students. Take it home, do your work there, making them aware of different opportunities for free broadband, free broadband services by some of our companies to try to give them as much support as possible. There's no charge for those that laptop rental. We were put in the national spotlight because of our laptop vending machines on campus. We have vending machines that have laptops in them. So you get your ID card, you swipe the ID card, you get a laptop out, do your work, return that laptop, it wipes it clean. You don't pay a dime to do that.
Fantastic. Wow, fantastic, wonderful. Has what has COVID-19 done in particular to mess this all up? Obviously, we've all had our lives changed dramatically. But as you continue this collaboration, this partnership, you've got programs like the Grand Rapids Promise program. You've got other kinds of things. Has COVID-19 muddied this water really difficult, or are you able to see ways through this?
Yeah, and it's a good question, especially when I think about the Promise Zone. And we hired before the virus, before all that hit, we had hired a coordinator for the Promise Zone. The coordinator, Evan Macklin, was an employee of the college that has transitioned to that coordinator position, and he has kept communication and conversation going with those families as we get those lists of students who are eligible for the Promise Zone from those high schools. Evan has been very intentional about reaching out to those students and reaching out to those families, saying, all right, this is still going. Just because you're not in school on ground anymore, we're still rolling with this Promise Zone. Let's get this done. And so we have continued that. We are actually seeing, from a standpoint of application, we're seeing some pretty good numbers. We hope that those numbers continue to rise from the Promise Zone, because we are very it's a huge partnership with us and the Promise Zone board. That whole effort, that we are very focused on that, not only being access for students, but we are looking for a success for those students on the other side of this. So we remain excited about the Promise Zone.
Bill, with all the challenges that are going on, particularly right now, what encourages you most? What we were talking before you came on about how the life of a college president right now is quite an adventure. Every day is new, but tough decisions to be made. But what has given you joy and encouragement in what you're doing and seeing now that gives you a lot of hope for the future?
I would say weekly, I receive emails from faculty, staff, and students at our school. And emails that are faculty members that say, you know what, wasn't sure about this thing when we got in, but oh my goodness, this has been a great experience because I've worked with my students in a way that I've never worked with them before. I've seen emails from students saying, thank you to the college for making decisions early on to keep us safe and to not have us require us coming to campus for the rest of the semester. But also students saying, man, this instructor has really made a big difference this semester. That to me has given me so much hope, Michael, because in the midst of such difficulty that this virus is causing, I have seen people rise to levels that they never knew they had, nor have never been called upon to do. We have a lot of faculty on our campus that teach online classes. We have a lot of them. We do a lot of online classes, but we had to have faculty who may not teach online very often. We had to have those faculty make that transition. And it has been so refreshing to see some of those faculty members then say, you know what, I didn't do it before, but now I know I can do it. And I think those are probably going to be some of the faculty that come and say, yeah, I can do that. The other thing it has done for us is that we are now in a place where we have written and continue to write a playbook that did not exist pre-COVID-19. What does the playbook look like when you are shut down for 2 to 3 months? What does that playbook look? We didn't have that one. I don't know who did, but we didn't have that playbook. We've got that playbook now. We are able now that if it's a virus, a polar vortex, or whatever, we know how to turn on a dime in a way that community colleges have always been able to do incredible work in short period of time. We shortened the period this time, and I think we're prepared now for the future. And as right now that we start planning out what summer and fall are going to look like, there's a mystery there. I feel very confident because our folks have knocked it out of the park this semester. I couldn't be prouder.
Oh, that's great way to end our conversation. And thanks to you, Bill. Thanks to your leadership. If people want to keep track of what you're doing and thinking and writing about, and keep track of what GRCC is looking forward to do in the days and weeks ahead, how can they do that? How can they keep in touch with what you're doing in innovation?
Yeah, one of the best ways is through our social media outlets. Our communications department does an awesome job at keeping our public informed through social media. So we have our Facebook, Instagram pages, a LinkedIn presence. Those continue on a daily basis to give very real-time information of what we're doing. I submit things to those as well from time to time. And so I would highly recommend connecting through social media to what we're doing. And if anything, as far as needing to contact us, needing some of the things that we've talked about tonight, go on to our website at grcc.edu. In our president's office, I take emails from any and everybody. My email address is on there. Be happy to hear from folks who say, hey, I have an idea, because I'm always thrilled at finding out what's next.
That's great. Bill Pink, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us and leading us in this discussion about education and industry working together, particularly so needed in this time. And I guess we feel like you're part of the dream team that we have here in West Michigan. We're proud of our community, and you're part of a team that makes this such a great place to live and gives us encouragement, even though there's some challenge. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you.
Yeah. You too. And thank you for being with us. We appreciate this, the 3-part Future of Work series done with our good friends, the Kent District Library. You can check out what they're doing at kdl.org. Check out what we're doing at worldmichigan.org. And as Bill said, grcc.edu. You can find out what's going on at community college. The next time we'll be with you is on Tuesday, May 12 at noon for a live stream conversation with U.S. Ambassador Bill Garvelink. He was the former ambassador to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, had a front row seat for the issues that dealt with the Ebola pandemic. And he's going to talk with us about COVID-19 and our future with pandemics. Going to be very interesting. Come again to our YouTube channel